My name is Bruno Randazzo. Most people think I'm a bastard. I run my own construction business, and last year I made over $100 million. I'm a great businessman, and I'm proud of it. Most of my workers are union members. They cost me more in terms of wages and benefits, but I make up for it by getting contracts I might otherwise miss out on and no work stoppages. I also have no problems with inspectors and permits. There are rumors of organized crime people associated with the union, but I am not aware of any of that. Several of my competitors have had accidents, equipment problems, and the like. I have been blamed for some of them, but there has never been any proof of it. Of course, I'm not guilty of any misdemeanors. Some people even whisper that I was the direct cause of several deaths. Of course, this is pure nonsense, but I believe it is to my advantage to keep these stories going. About 10 years ago, I found it necessary to marry for business reasons. I acquired for myself a trophy wife. There was no love or courtship in this union. She was a very attractive and classy gal who seemed interested in me. I was a good earner at the time, so I had plenty of girls to choose from. Unfortunately, I wasn't too successful in this endeavor. Although she met all my modest criteria, she turned out to be a less-than-loving wife. The only sensible thing I did was to get a solid prenup. For the past 4 years, Betty has been trying to get a divorce. Of course, she's looking for the big bucks. She seems to think that by turning myself into a miserable bitch, I'll be more inclined to leave her at any cost. I'm sorry, but that's not how it works. I was raised to believe that divorce was not an option. Bruno, I can't put up with this shitty marriage much longer. What the hell do I have to do to get you to give me a divorce? We've been over this before, and you know the answer. Come on, Bruno, none of us are happy, and there's no point in prolonging that unhappiness. Take up a hobby or something. I'm not going to give you a divorce, and that's final. Well, what if I sue him? What then? What are you going to use as a foundation? My lawyers are going to eat you up. I haven't done anything to justify this, and you know it. I don't hit you, cheat on you, or even verbally abuse you. Anything you can come up with will not stand up to criticism. I'm afraid we'll be married until you're ready for Social Security. Damn it, Bruno, how about I cheat on you? Will you divorce me if I start sleeping around? No, honey, I won't, but I can assure you there will be a couple of dead lovers around. Pretty soon this will be known and they'll start avoiding you like Typhoid Mary. You're a bastard, you know that? She turned and walked out of the room. I couldn't help but admire her beautiful, rounded ass as she slipped out of the room. She swayed from side to side as she walked. Her shoulder-length dark hair swayed back and forth in time with the movements of her ass. It was a sight to behold. She wasn't skinny like many trophy wives. She was shapely and slender. She had never seemed so smart. If only her brain was as sharp as her tongue. I put that conversation behind me like countless others. I realized she was up to something, but I didn't want to sit around and wait. But all good things come to an end. It was a plain brown manila envelope. It was addressed to me and had no return address. I scrutinized it carefully because something didn't seem right. Finally, I opened it. Inside were about 20 photographs. They showed my loving wife Betty having sex with a large Hispanic guy. Quickly flipping through the pictures, I sat down at the kitchen table with a cold Foster's. I very carefully laid out all the pictures on the table. It was funny, I thought I would be outraged, but no. Something was strange, and the longer I looked at the pictures, the more mesmerized I became. They were all different. But it was obvious that all the pictures were taken at the same time. After a few more servings of Foster's, I began to clearly understand what was going on. There was a third person in the photos because they were all taken from different angles and well-focused. None of the photos showed any penetration. How stupid is that? My stupid wife was faking sex and showing me the pictures. The photos were so fake that there was no way I could use them to prove adultery on her part because her lawyer would turn me into a laughingstock. But if I looked at them, got angry and went to kill the guy, I'd go to jail and she'd get the money. Tricky bitch. So who was that guy? I separated the pictures so I could get a good look at his face. There were only 4, but it was clear enough that I knew who it was. Carlo Quartero was a Portuguese guy who moved here from Rhode Island about 5 years ago. He was trying to set up an earthwork business in my neighborhood, using non-union labor and charging much lower prices than I did. He gambled and it didn't work. I put him out of business in less than a year. Betty knew I hated the guy for meddling in my business. Now I understand why she chose him. For some reason he stayed here, even after losing everything. I thought for sure he was going back to RI. Okay, I knew where to find him, so what to do now? I'm out of cold beer. I went into the bedroom. I looked in Betty's nightstand. There was her .25 caliber Beretta. I thought for a few minutes and decided that I would use my old .45 caliber army pistol. I still wasn't sure how I was going to proceed, but I couldn't stand being baited. The drive to Carlo's house took about 30 minutes. A shabby '89 Chevy was parked in front of the house. Things got very lively after that. Around 6:30, I got home. I walked into the kitchen. Betty was sitting at the table, picking at her salad. I opened the cupboard drawer, threw a .45 caliber pistol in there, and slammed it shut. My shirt and pants were covered in blood. I took them off and took them to the laundry room. Throwing them in the washing machine, I came back to the kitchen in my underwear. Betty just stared at me. "What's wrong, honey?" "Are you in trouble?" I asked. "No." "That's okay. Would you like me to make you a sandwich?" "I'm going to take a shower and go down to Porzio's for linguine. Don't wait up for me." As I left the room, I noticed a small smile on my wife's face. Everything was going just as she had planned. There were some very important people at Porzio's that night. In fact, they were there almost every night. I stopped at their table and paid my respects. I mentioned that I would be tied up for a few weeks and that everything would be fine. I took a table in the corner and ordered a bottle of Lancer's Rose. It seemed to me that Portuguese wine was appropriate for the occasion. I started with the antipasto. There was no hurry. It was going to be a long evening. Around 9:30 they showed up. 2 detectives in cheap suits approached my table. 2 uniformed men stood at the door. I smiled and pushed away from the table to greet them. "Bruno Randazzo, you're under arrest for the murder of Carlo and Luisa Quartera. You have the right to remain." His voice got quieter and quieter, and I couldn't hear anything else. I was led out of the restaurant in handcuffs, and I smiled as they put me in the police cruiser. They didn't know that my lawyer was already at the police station waiting for us. I always like to plan. The meeting at the police station went as expected. "Mr. Randazzo, do you know Carlo and Luisa Quartera?" My lawyer, John Fermi, nodded if I could answer and shook his head if I couldn't. In this case, he nodded. I knew Mr. Quartera, but did not have the pleasure of meeting his wife. "How do you know him?" "Some time ago, he opened a non-union construction company in the area that competed directly with my company. He was in business for less than a year and then closed down." "So you have a grudge against him?" "No, he went out of business. I settled my grudge and moved on." "When was the last time you saw him?" "About 6 months ago." "Why?" "We believe that Mr. Quartera and his wife were murdered this morning in their home, and we have reason to believe that it was you who killed them." My lawyer leaned over to me and asked me not to say anything more. "What makes you think my client had anything to do with this?" "Quartera was shot with a .45 caliber machine gun. We found shell casings at the murder scene. The shooting. The pin markings match the pin markings on Mr. Randazzo's gun." "Where did you get Mr. Randazzo's gun?" "It doesn't matter now." "That's for sure, and if I don't get an answer, we'll leave." "We also have a shirt belonging to Mr. Randazzo that has blood on it. We believe it is Quartera blood and are awaiting DNA results." "And where did you get Mr. Randazzo's shirt?" "We're not going to cooperate anymore unless you start being straight with us." "Where did you find the bodies, and do the bullets recovered from the bodies match the bullets from my client's gun?" "We don't have any bodies at this time." "So we have a murder with a nobody. That's very interesting. Is there anything else you want to tell us?" "We found a car belonging to the Quartera in the backyard of one of Mr. Randazzo's construction equipment lots. It had burned to the ground." "Were the bodies in the car?" "No." "Why would my client do something like this?" "Because of the pictures he got in the mail." I looked at John and shrugged. "I didn't get any pictures in the mail." "Gentlemen, either charge Mr. Randazzo now or we're leaving. You don't even have proof that a murder was committed, so you can't charge him with anything. We still want to know where you got the gun and shirt that you claim are related to the mysterious crime." There was no response from the other side of the table. John and I stood up and quietly left the room without making any objections. After leaving the police station, we went to John Fermi's office. John, you know I'm being set up. It looks like it. Is that your wife? I think so, yes. She really wants out of the marriage, and I think it has something to do with that. Bruno, if she gets you sent to jail, she can file for divorce and get a settlement, even if you have a prenup. Someone must have given her legal advice. I'll look into it. John, there's a lot more going on here than meets the eye, but I'm going to keep some of it from you. In some cases, the less you know, the less chance you have of getting into trouble. I'm going to tell you enough so you can protect me, but not enough to ruin the whole thing. That makes it rough, Bruno. What do you want me to do? Just keep me out of jail and find out who's helping Betty. It was morning. I walked into my office and Joe Stempy was waiting for me. Joe held a unique position among my business associates. He was a facilitator and a fact gatherer. I knew what he was here for. Bruno, give me an update. It's simple, Joe. My wife is trying to set me up to go to jail so she can divorce my ass and walk away with the money. How did she do it? She set up a fake affair with Carlo Quartera and fed it to me so I'd blow my score and go kill the guy. Then I'd end up in jail so she could dump me. What makes her think you'd buy that stupid shit? I told her that if I ever caught her with another guy, I would kill him. She realized I meant it, and she's trying to use it against me. I don't understand. If that's the case, why is Frankie Donato still walking the streets? What are you talking about? Who the hell is Frankie Donato? Joe didn't say anything. He just sat there shaking his head. Damn it! Bruno, I screwed up big time and I'm sorry. What the hell are you talking about? We all thought you knew about Frankie and that you were okay with it. We couldn't even imagine that you didn't know. Come on, Joe. Spit it out. What do you want to say? All right, Bruno, but remember, don't kill the messenger. I nodded at him. Frankie and Betty were lovers for about 12 years. They were together before you were married and after. They meet at his house about twice a week. Frankie even brags about sleeping with Betty at your wedding reception before you took her to the hotel. You were drinking and partying, and Betty was upstairs having fun with Frankie in her wedding dress. Why didn't I know about this, Joe? Everyone thought you knew. It was common knowledge. They thought you didn't care. Hell, I don't think I've even met Frankie Donato. How did she keep this from me for 10 years? I don't know, but that's why when you said you'd take out any guy she was with, I didn't understand why you didn't just do it with Frankie. We both sat like that for a minute. Bruno, what do you want me to do? It's okay, Joe, it's all right. Fermi's got the cops under control and it won't come to trial. I've got a couple aces up my sleeve. Tell everyone there's nothing to worry about. When I returned home, my loving wife was already waiting for me. What are you doing here? How did they let you out already? How did they manage to bail you out so quickly? Damn, woman, you ask a lot of questions. They didn't have enough evidence to charge me, so they had to leave me free. Didn't even need bail. By the way, how the hell did they get my gun and shirt? Betty stuttered a little. She was having a hard time answering the question. I don't know, dear. They just showed up at the door and asked for you. I said you weren't home and they asked if they could look around. I was scared, so I just said yes. They found the gun and the shirt, and then they just left. I knew it was all bullshit, but I let it pass. I went upstairs, took a shower, and slept for a couple hours. All the next week I was busy at work. John Fermi told me that Betty had gone to Allentown and found a lawyer who told her everything she needed to do to get me settled. John said the Allentown lawyer would no longer be counseling her. The results of the DNA test on my shirt came back. There were 3 different blood samples, mine, Luis's, and Carlo's. The police still didn't have a body. It seems they also spoke to my wife again and asked her about the photos that had allegedly prompted my rampage. She insisted that I had them, but since I denied it, she couldn't prove anything. This meant that the police had no motive. The police tried to piece together a case based on the shell casings and the bloody shirt, but it was pretty weak. Joe picked me up and took me to Portzio's. There were several important people waiting for us, but most importantly, a new face. I'd never seen him before, but he had an air of authority about him. Bruno, I want to introduce you to Roberto Costas. Mr. Costas has come all the way from Rhode Island to meet you. It's a pleasure, Mr. Costas. I haven't met many people from your region. Roberto smiled and shook my hand. Yes, but you've already met my son-in-law, Carlo. Yes, I am. I'm sorry for the trouble I caused him. Oh, don't worry. No hard feelings about him trying to start a competitive construction company. I told him it was stupid, but he was a hard worker and determined to make it work in spite of you. What can I do for you, Mr. Costa? My sister Louise is worried. I didn't hurt your sister, and I don't intend to hurt her. I know that. She's not afraid of you, Bruno. She told me that you were very generous in sending her and Carlos on the Alaskan cruise. She tried to explain the circumstances to me, but I'm afraid it was too complicated. In any case, I'm grateful for your kindness. Louise is afraid of your wife, Betty. She says she is a fierce and determined woman and cannot be trusted. I understand. Hopefully, in a few days, the problem will be resolved. By the time Carlos and Louisa are home, everything should be under control. I also bought them a new car to repay them for the trouble my wife caused. Thank you, Mr. Randazzo. My sister will be pleased to know that they will be allowed to return next week. I appreciate your cooperation and look forward to working with you in the future. We all shook hands again. Joe and I headed to my office. Okay, Bruno, now would be a good time to tell me what the hell is going on. The guy from Rhode Island knows more about this than I do. Joe, you're going to have to be quiet for now. I still have some things to take care of. Betty went to see a lawyer in Allentown who told her what she needs to do to get me sent to jail. Then she can divorce me and bypass the prenup. Carlos and Luisa Quartera have been having financial problems since I put him out of business. They were more than 3 months behind on their mortgage payment and were about to lose the house. Betty somehow found out about it and went to see them. She agreed to give them enough money to pay it off if Luisa would take some pictures of Carlos and Betty having sex. They didn't have sex, but the pictures indicated otherwise. Louise revealed that Betty had filled the ketchup dispenser with mayonnaise and sprinkled it on herself to make it look like Carlos had erupted. Luisa had to keep Carlos in suspense until they got all the pictures taken. Betty mailed the pictures to me and I recognized Carlos right away. Then I realized the pictures were fake. I went to Carlos and Luisa and they told me the whole story. You went to shoot them? Well, I wasn't sure. The pictures looked fake and I needed them to confirm it. Louise got angry when I explained to her what Betty was trying to do. She didn't like the fact that Betty was setting them up to be shot by an angry husband. It wasn't hard to convince them to agree to help me. Does John Fermi know about all this, Bruno? No, but I'll bring him up to speed this afternoon. I had to keep him in the dark so he wouldn't have a problem with the bar. What about the blood and the shells? I told them to take a small bag, but not to make it look like they were going anywhere. Stella at the travel agency found them tickets to Seattle and a cabin for a 3-week Alaskan cruise. In Seattle, they had plenty of time to buy clothes with the $2,000 I gave them for expenses. I took a couple of old living room pillows and fired half a dozen silence shots into them, leaving the shell casings on the kitchen floor. We threw the pillows into the back seat of the Chevy. Carlos and I forced Luisa to cut her hand with great difficulty, but she finally did it. We smeared the blood of all 3 of us on my shirt. I made him sign over the title to the car and drive it to my parking lot in Mount Penn. After we set the car on fire, I drove them to the Philadelphia airport. Back home, I hid the gun while Betty watched and put my bloody shirt in the laundry basket. I was sure what she would do next. Joe seemed impressed. The boys will be talking about this fiasco for a long time, Bruno. I won't say anything to anyone until you give the okay, but I think you'd better bring Fermi up to speed as soon as possible. After Joe left, I went in to see John Fermi. For the next few days, I was busy with work. This whole situation was like a boil on my neck. Eventually, it has to burst and burst. It happened on Friday. Betty and I were sitting in the living room having a nice quiet evening at home. She got up to answer a knock on the door and let 2 detectives and 6 uniformed men in. Bruno, these gentlemen have a search warrant and I had to let them in. A smirk appeared on her face, which I desperately wanted to wipe away, but instead smiled to myself. My wife waited patiently for the police to find what they were looking for and drag my ass back to the station. About 10 minutes later, one of the men came down the stairs with my wife's Beretta in a plastic evidence bag. I found it, Lieutenant. It was lying in the nightstand and was recently discharged. As I stood up, the detective turned to my wife. Betty Randazzo, you're under arrest for the murder of Frank Donato. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to... He read the rest of it on the way to the patrol car. Betty looked back at me as if she wanted me to help, but didn't know how to ask. I stood in the doorway and watched the patrol cars drive down the street. No lawyer in town would dare talk to her. Her only hope was a public defender. Frankie Donato was found in his apartment, shot 8 times with a .25 caliber automatic rifle. Only Frankie and Betty's fingerprints were found in the apartment. On the kitchen table, they found 16 pictures of Betty having sex with an unknown man. I didn't think they would, but they found some partial fingerprints on the Beretta. Turned out to be Betty's prints. Neighbors identified Betty as a regular visitor to the apartment. There was no lawyer to talk to her, no bail bondsman to do it. The next day, Carlos and Luisa returned from vacation. They called the police to find out why their house had been marked as a crime scene while they were away. Shortly thereafter, John Fermi called to inform them that the charges had been dropped. Carlos and his wife wouldn't tell the police any more than they had to and refused to answer questions after the first 10 minutes. They shrugged off the police, expressing tremendous anger and resentment about the whole affair. The police decided to leave it at that. Betty was in jail and only her public defender could talk to her. I went to see her, but she refused to deal with me. 2 months later, after a speedy trial, Betty went to Muncie for 10 to 15 years. For good behavior, she could have been released in 8, but I made sure that never happened. While Betty was awaiting trial, I started a new excavation company. It was designed to do small jobs with non-unionized employees. I convinced my companions that it would be good business if we both worked independently, but under my control. Materials and other things would come from my regular suppliers, which suited everyone. Carlos Cuartero was eager to take over this new division in my place. I knew he was a capable man, and I knew I could trust him. One sunny afternoon, there was a knock on the door, and there stood the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. "Hello, my name is Elizabeth Costa. My brother Roberto asked me to come and take care of you. Where would you like me to put my bags?" "By the stairs, that would be nice." I couldn't say anything else. I just stood and admired this goddess while the cab driver put the luggage on the floor. The cab driver drove away with a big smile and a good tip. What does that mean? How are you going to take care of me? To please my brother, you have deprived yourself of the companionship of your wife. I will take care of your home. I will accompany you to all the social events you must attend, and I will see to it that you are fed and clothed. All your needs will be met. Sounds like a mother to me. You slept with your mother? Of course not. Relax, Bruno, everything will be fine. If anyone asks, I'm just a housekeeper and companion. At night, I'm your whore. If you hurt me, you'll die like a little frog on a hot sidewalk. Do you understand? I think I'm in love. My life is better now. Elizabeth and I go to Williamsport every month to visit Betty. Elizabeth likes Betty to see her when we visit. Most of the time, Betty refuses to talk to me. She has already filed for a divorce from prison, but I refused. I will stay married to Betty for the rest of my life, but I don't think I will ever live with her again. Every 2 or 3 months, she gets involved in some mess in Muncie, which adds a little more time to her sentence. Elizabeth has no desire to get married. As long as things go smoothly, we'll stay together. If at some point she decides to leave, I won't stop her. I enjoyed my time with her and will always remember it.